stand out, you might be able to do something about that. What about the writing? Now, did you have to do the writing sample on the MCAT?
I did, yes. Yes.
And did that, you felt that, how did you prepare for that? Did you feel you were prepared for it, or did you?
I actually did not prepare terribly much for that writing. My program ended and I had to take the MCAT about 3 weeks later, so I didn't get a ton of time to prepare, so that's one of the areas that I didn't actually prepare terribly hard in. And it's funny because I've had so much experience with writing. I took all these classes in college. I was a writer for the local newspaper and all these other things, and I actually did really poorly on the writing section of the MCAT. Embarrassingly poorly. I had to regrade it even because I didn't.
You called them up and said, this can't be right.
Yeah, pretty much, because it's just something I never had a problem with. So that's probably one piece of advice I could give is don't think that you obviously know how to write. You've been writing forever, because there's a certain style that they want you to do it in.
Exactly, where you have to develop that theme and you got to support it or go against it. And,
and if you don't follow that particular style, no matter how good your writing is, you will not do well on the writing portion. So that would be my bit of advice. I mean, I don't think it necessarily hurt me. That's not a large component of the MCAT.
Especially with your history, that may have been something else. Say, hey, I did this creative writing I did for the. Did that come up during the interview at all? Did you shamefully come in with your head hung low?
Well, I think he may have said that this is the one part of your MCAT that's really below average, and so I think it was a little embarrassing, but I just told him that I hadn't really prepared for it. And, I mean, it ended up being fine. It wasn't a big deal, but that's, don't take anything for granted. I would prepare for everything.
And as far as your MCATs go, would you feel comfortable telling us what your grades were? I don't know what they were. You were above average, average, or?
Probably, it was a 30. I don't know what at the time. I honestly can't remember. I think that was probably pretty good, but I mean, it wasn't, whatever, like a 35 or 40 like some of my classmates had gotten. But
You're very happy with that, right?
Yeah, I was happy, and that was.
And as far as your GPA goes, then you were above average?
In undergrad, I had a 3.98, and at Hopkins, I had like a 3.8 or something. Yeah. Well, yeah. I was a big math fan.
You're a big math fan. So yes. But it doesn't matter, right, what your major was. I mean, if you show up, if paper comes across this guy's desk that says 3.98 undergrad, and then the other stuff was what? Then you said it was supposed to be?
It was like a 3.8.
3.8, right? And then so it doesn't matter if it was in, shoe tying or whatever. You look good on paper. You go to the top of the stack, pretty much, I would think, right? To say, hey, this person at least got a. Has to get some kind of interview, right? And especially with your MCATs, we're average to just above average, right? I mean, so what about as far as what would you tell a young, impressionable freshman at college that says, I want to be a medical doctor? With his hands on his hips, standing like Superman.
Right. Well, right now, as a student, my 4th year, and having put in so much time and having been so exhausted for the past few years, I would first tell them to take a really hard look to make sure it's what they want to do. Then I would tell them to make certain shadow doctors and get an accurate idea of what medicine is like. And then I guess, just work hard in your classes, but enjoy college at the same time, because it's the other aspects of college besides your pre-medical work that make you a unique applicant. So it's kind of, work hard, get good grades in organic chemistry, biology, stuff like that. Take initiative, do some research maybe, but then also, like I said, you really need to be involved extracurricularly, because I know that they look very heavily at that sort of thing, especially for, maybe not so much for residencies and future things, but definitely for medical school.
Because if you show up with that 4.0, like you say, a 3, whatever, and you don't have any extracurricular
if you haven't done anything, then that's...
Right, and that's all they know is that you sit around and read all the time. And I didn't mean to be disparaging by saying that to equivalate your math major with shoe tying. I hope you didn't get that.
No.
Okay, good, because I was like, oh. So just, take a good hard look at it. Yeah, absolutely. What about through this process that you've taken from doing first year to second year to third year, now you're at 4th year, was there any part of this that was better or worse for you once you got here? Did you say, oh, the first 2 years were okay, then once you got into clinicals, it was...
I think everybody says that the first 2 years are so terrible because it's all book work, and then the third is much better because you get into the hospital. But I would disagree. I thought the first 2 years were just as hard, the third year was just as difficult as the first two because it's different. You have to start seeing patients, you have to start organizing your knowledge, I guess, that you learned the first 2 years. So I think pretty much, finally now in the fourth year, things are starting to come together and kind of make more sense. But, it was rough last year with going through the different rotations, and it was rough the first 2 years with all the hours and book work that it took.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I know that I have many other questions, but I'm out of them now. Can't possibly remember what I wanted to ask you. But it was a good conversation. I appreciate it. I hope there's a medical student out there that will appreciate it. Okay, Dr. Rust here. Hey, so this young lady, she had a very interesting route to medical school. She had her brother is a doc, the ophthalmologist, right? So she kind of knew what was going on, had an impression about what she thought was being a doctor was all about, and so she went back to school, doing some postgraduate work to get her requirements in. And I think that can only help you as an individual. Some people think it might hurt you to have to go back and get your requirements. I think it shows some commitment, some serious commitment that, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to be a doctor. And so here you are taking extra classes and maintaining a commitment and going forward. I don't think you want to purposefully not graduate or purposefully mess around and not take your prerequisites. And that, lots of people, majority of people, go straight through, are able to get the job done. Now, but then also she had the interesting thing that her MCAT scores she had an excellent GPA. But the MCAT scores were average, better than average. And how about her writing sample? Just tanked the writing sample. And so her whole explanation was, now, and this is the thing, if you have a blind interviewer, sometimes you go into an interview and these people haven't looked at your record or your transcript because you got more than one interviewer. And so they kind of blind this person to it, because if you go in there with a 3.98 GPA and excellent MCAT scores, it might turn this person off a little bit, or no, it doesn't turn the person off. It shuts down some of their interpretation of what you're saying, because you could be a total wanker, okay, and all of a sudden you show up with all these look good on paper, but it kind of is overshadowed by the excitement that this guy knows what he's talking about, and the interviewer gets wrapped up in it. But but the interview could be blind to everything that's in your resume. So you walk out the door and they open up the MCAS application, and then all of a sudden they look at the writing assignment, and they're like, whoa, what is going on here? I thought this guy looked pretty. I understand he got good GPA, he got good MCAS scores. The interview went fine, but how come this guy didn't bring up this writing assignment? How come they didn't bring that up? Because it must be a huge blemish, and they must not want to talk about it, or they must be an idiot savant or something like that, right? So you want to address it, you want to bring it up, you want to, if anything comes up about grades, say, this is something that happened, and this is how I believe I got that kind of grade. I was really surprised that it happened, and back it up. She wrote for her school newspaper. She took creative writing classes. I'm sure that an excellent personal statement probably did her well for her, but she had to certainly let them know where she was and where she stood on the whole writing assignment, which I think and it didn't hurt her in the end. I think that would overshadow. It's kind of like an excellent GPA would overshadow a poor MCAT score, and then a fantastic MCAT score might overshadow a poor GPA. And and all of a sudden here you are, you got a